Hello, everyone. My name is Krishan. I'm a developer advocate here at Airbyte, and I want to welcome you all to community call number 13. This is a community call number 13, and I want to introduce you to someone who's done the first 11 community calls here at Airbyte, and his name is Abhi. Nice shirt, Abhi. Nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thought I'd rock the Airbyte shirt because I feel comfortable wearing it up here. Yeah, as you mentioned, I've done the last 11 of these, or I think you and Justin held it down for the last one. But yeah, I am officially over at plural.sh now. I'm leading their community team, and
you're the head of community. You need to say your title. You're the head of community at Plural.
I'll talk about what I'm doing, Chris, but I think running the Airbyte community calls has always been really fun. So I thought it'd be cool if I jumped on here with you to kind of talk about what we're building out, especially because of like how closely it ties in with Airbyte. I think that was like the funniest part, is that moving over to Plural is that we are kind of very deeply integrated with the ecosystem that Airbyte's in, but we're more, I guess, one level down, right? So now we're looking at the infrastructure that's like supporting Airbyte. Like, how are we deploying Airbyte? Where are we deploying it? So I'm really excited to get into a lot of that today and kind of do a quick demo. So
Plural is an open source unified application deployment platform, right? And your goal at Plural is to make it easy to run open source software in particular on Kubernetes, or is it just any software in general?
Yeah, so most specifically, our mission is about running open source software. So we are an open source platform. I'd like to do kind of like more of a conversational style with you where we kind of walk through this. So basically, yeah, we are a open source DevOps platform for Kubernetes. And so what does that mean? Primarily are a command line interface that you can pull down and start deploying Kubernetes clusters with open source applications on them. We are fully open source. We charge any money to use our tool. You can check us out on GitHub. All you have to do is just pull our command line interface down and run Plural in it to get started. The way that we work is we use a GitOps workflow that stores all of your configuration inside a GitHub repository. If you are familiar with the Kubernetes space, there's a lot of different configuration that's required to spin up a Kubernetes cluster. Some of the words that might come to mind are Helm, Terraform, YAML files. These are the things that we automatically generate for you. Managing Kubernetes deployments and managing these YAML files has notoriously been a very difficult problem for a lot of people. There's a huge barrier to entry for getting into the Kubernetes landscape, and a lot of that is due to kind of the bulkiness of managing a lot of these different files, managing Terraform, which is an incredibly powerful tool, but is also an incredibly destructive and scary tool to kind of just use without really understanding what it is. And additionally, Helm is a technology that a lot of people are starting to get to understand and starting to write Helm files as the primary way of packaging up an application to deploy it onto Kubernetes. But this is something that I don't think we should learn in order just to kind of get applications up. And so basically what happens is that you run Plural, and we'll create a GitHub repository for you using your GitHub credentials. And then we will start building out these manifests for you based off of what you want to run. And then you run build to actually write all of these manifests. And then you run deploy to actually push all of these manifests into production. And all of them will spin up in the cloud provider of your choice, using the cloud credentials that you have provided to us.
Awesome. How long does it take to get Plural running?
So I guess not counting the amount of time that I guess your specific cloud provider is going to take in spinning up your resources, it would realistically take you about 5 minutes to actually build out all of the files required for spinning up a Kubernetes cluster and spinning up individual applications on there. I guess that kind of like flows into my next point about kind of like this application marketplace. You mentioned earlier about, are we focused on just kind of general applications, or are we focused on open source applications? And we are in particular focused on open source applications. So we have over 60 applications that you can install onto.
Oh, wow, 60.
And so in the same way, actually, the analogy I like to use is actually with Airbyte. So you know how like Airbyte has like tons of connectors that you can just come and install, and you can come in and build these connectors to increase the amount of like data sources or data destinations that you can sync data to it from, right? In the same way, you can build out a Plural app and you can basically support it to run on Plural. So we're constantly building out these apps to basically be supported onto Plural. And all all you need to install them is just run plural bundle install. And that's what writes all of the Helm and Terraform for you and all of the Kubernetes manifests. And then you run a deploy and you're up and running. So basically, we have packaged all of these applications individually to make sure that they run not only with Plural, but also well with each of the individual cloud providers. Now, this is something that I don't know if you're aware of, but some applications, running them is very different, for example, on Azure than it is on GCP or AWS, right? So we make sure that each of these individual deployments, regardless of where you're trying to deploy it, works. So you'll go ahead and when you provide your cloud credentials, we'll infer which cloud provider you're using, and then we will deploy you the one that is configured for that specific cloud provider.
It's awesome. And by the end of 2020, how many production-ready open source software packages do you hope to have? 2022, sorry.
2020, we don't exist.
Oh, gosh.
2022, mostly looking to have all of the ones that people are requesting to us. So I expect we get to probably over 100 based off of the way that we're growing. We're trying to make it in the same way that Airbyte has a CDK. We're trying to create an SDK to make it really easy to kind of build out the onboarding strategy for an application. We actually do right now have like a command that you can run with our CLI. If you run plural create, it runs a generator in the same way that the Airbyte CDK runs a generator when you run generate.sh for the first time. So we generate a lot of this stuff you need in order to support an application running on Plural initially. So we're hoping to get to probably about 100, if not more, at the end of the year. And most importantly, a lot of the open source projects that I guess the community really wants us to add support for.
Yeah. And can I ask one question too, though? You know, if there is some, I mean, you mentioned about building CDK, having CDK like an SDK, just like how we have our own CDK. What if there was an application they wanted that doesn't exist? Is there a request that they can make? Do they just message you in your Discord channel?
Yeah. So basically the way you do that is that we have a repo under the Plural organization called plural-artifacts. And all you have to do is open an issue, and then we'll add it to our roadmap and start working on it pretty much right away. We've been knocking out pretty much everything through that issue list, and it's kind of only accelerating from here with some of the support that we're bringing on.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that this is a really solid way to especially get people into deploying stuff on Kubernetes. It doesn't really require understanding a lot of the complicated stuff that goes into installing multiple applications. For example, something that's really common is if you wanted to deploy a data stack. So you want to deploy Airbyte, you want to deploy Dagster, Airflow, and then you want to deploy Superset or Metabase, right? All you have to do is just run 3 plural bundle install commands, and we will install all 3 of those applications onto your Kubernetes cluster for you, and in a dependency aware fashion. So if there's a specific order that things need to be installed in, if there's specific orders in which dependencies need to be installed in, we'll make sure we actually create what's called a dependency map, and we make sure that this map and this dependency graph is always in a good state. So this is some of the stuff that I think when people are getting into Kubernetes, they don't necessarily understand or really should understand. There's this huge barrier to entry in terms of the understanding required. And we're trying to do as much as possible to bring that barrier to entry down so that people can start managing their applications a lot easier. And of course, we manage all of the GitOps through this, meaning if a good pattern to use when you're working with infrastructure as code is using kind of versioning and using a version control system. So we will automatically manage that for you. If you run a plural build and run a plural deploy, the deploy will automatically like create a commit and push the commit up to this repository that we've created for you. And so, as I mentioned before, there's tons of apps that you can deploy on Plural, all for free. As we've said, these are open source applications that we've bundled to be installed on Plural. And Airbyte is, I think, definitely one of like the big ones in our marketplace that a lot of people have been talking to us about, especially in our Discord, have been working with us to make sure that their Airbyte installations on Plural have been going well. That's been great. But as I mentioned before, you can co-locate it with Airflow, you can co-locate it with Dagster, you can co-locate it with BI tools. So this allows you to kind of bring up the entire stack in one go. Additionally, if you're running a Kubernetes cluster, this is actually a question we've received both in the Airbyte Slack and in our own Slack, is kind of around the cost of running a Kubernetes cluster. I do want to be clear that running a Kubernetes cluster is not cheap, right? So it's like there are costs that come with it. It's definitely a lot cheaper than trying to pay for, I guess, like pay for different services and not self-host it, but it's going to be something that that if you want to maximize your resources, the usage of your resources, you do want to like co-locate all of your applications. So what's awesome is that if you have this Kubernetes cluster running, you can just start putting a bunch of applications on it, and we'll make sure that everything's running properly. We'll make sure that we're doing auto scaling. It's kind of set up so that you can leverage Kubernetes instead of just kind of it being this bulky thing that's just that's just costing you a lot of money, and there's like no reason for running it, right? Because for some people, running Airbyte on EC2 is going to be kind of like a more logical like decision for them. But for some people who want to get all of the benefits of Kubernetes, like having your pods automatically come back up when they go down, having those live checks, having those readiness checks, having the auto scaling available, and having all of your infrastructure located in one place, most importantly, to take advantage of Kubernetes networking, this is going to be really powerful for them.
And does Plural work with Mercury version control? We just had a question from chat.
Did you say Mercury version control? No. So right now we have started adding support for various different version control systems. Right now, the two that we support are GitHub and GitLab. We are going to be adding support for Bitbucket pretty soon, and I think we'll be looking into support for Mercury for sure. So basically, as I mentioned before, this is what it takes to deploy a Kubernetes cluster and to deploy applications onto it. It's previously this would be a far more complicated experience, whether you're trying to do it on your own or whether you're trying to, go through whether it's the AWS management console or the GCP management console. This is essentially what it takes to install a Kubernetes cluster with Plural. There's Plural in it, which, as I mentioned, creates the repository for you. It'll ask you a bunch of questions and take you through an install wizard to make sure that you have your cloud credentials set up correctly. And then you install each of the individual apps, and they have all of their individual install wizards as well. And then build will actually write all of the Helm and Terraform for you. And that's where all of the YAML files as well will be created, and then deploy will push all of this into production, and it will commit all of this configuration into the GitHub repo that Plural has created on your behalf.
And all is done simply 4 easy steps. That's amazing.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, this is something that we're looking to build out the application environments for, the marketplace for this. We're looking to build out the experience of onboarding to different applications, and we're definitely looking to like partner with different projects. And as we've done with Airbyte, and I think this has been really awesome that we've been able to, collaborate on this and kind of show how bring the power of Kubernetes to the Airbyte community and Airbyte users. So something that I wanted to kind of show, which is a demo about like our Cloud Shell. This is a different experience from the CLI. So some people may not want to use the CLI experience. Some people may want to use an in-browser experience for using Plural, or maybe for some reason they want to kind of access their installation or change things about their installation purely through an in-browser experience. And this is actually something that we've built out. If you're familiar with Azure, Azure has a Cloud Shell that gives all of this functionality as well. We've modeled it off of that one and other Cloud Shells. So I wanted to go ahead and show a demonstration of the Cloud Shell and how you can deploy Plural, a Kubernetes cluster, and Airbyte onto a Kubernetes cluster, just kind of using our in-browser Cloud Shell.
We have quite a few questions. Thomas Perez Alvarez asked, Thomas didn't understand the dependency tree across applications when co-deploying the data stack. And so like, how does Plural manage the dependency between multiple applications?
If there's a dependency that's required, we'll just make sure that it's installed before trying to attempt to install it. It's less of a cross different applications thing, and it's more of relative to a specific application. For example, this is actually something that we're coming up upon pretty soon. Like in order to install PostHog, which is another open source application, there's a ClickHouse dependency, right? So this means that we need to make sure that ClickHouse is onboarded onto Plural, right? And so when you try to install PostHog, it'll see that, oh, it's required that ClickHouse needs to be installed on this cluster. So, and then if there was another application that also required it, then do this check that pulls out that requirement for you. And if there's an order of the different applications that's required in that way, it makes sure that it follows that logical step. Thomas, I can direct you to this afterward as well. And I believe there's one more question.
Yeah, there's one more from, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, Ivica?
Ivica.
Ivica, thank you. Will Plural always be targeted for Kubernetes, or, this is a good question, or are there any plans to support more lightweight orchestrators such as Nomad? That's a very good question.
I don't have the direct answer for that because I think we are very much tied to Kubernetes currently. But I think definitely, I think our CTO Michael is here. I think he could definitely talk to, I guess, that part of our roadmap in particular, but definitely not anytime soon because there's a lot of things that we are specifically tied to with Kubernetes, mostly because of like the manifests that are created, the Helm, I think, which is tied to Kubernetes. There's a lot of different technologies that we're currently tied to there. If it does make sense in the future, I'm sure that it's something that we would definitely be able to extend with the setup that we have currently. So here is the Plural dashboard. So when you log into app.plural.sh, you get taken to this dashboard right here, which shows you some of the installations that you have. It shows you this is where you can manage your account. This is where you can manage access for your different users to a lot of the applications that you've installed. But as I mentioned, most importantly, you can go ahead and check out the in-browser shell, right? So this is a instance of the shell that we've already spun up. This is where you would run all of your Plural commands if you wanted to run this through the in-browser shell. What I'm going to do now actually is I'm going to log out and actually go through the install workflow for this. So we're going to use this account that I've set up in advance, and we are going to go ahead and log in with GitHub to start. So we're going to log in with GitHub to basically authorize Plural to create Git repositories on our behalf. Plural will use this Git repository, as I mentioned before, to manage the state, basically the creation and storage of all of these YAML manifests for the Terraform files and the Helm files. We can go ahead and put this repository under my personal account. We can just call it Avia Test 3. And here is actually where this is kind of one of the main benefits of like using the Cloud Shell just to try out Plural. You can just use a demo account on us. And if you don't want to input your cloud provider credentials, if for some reason you just want to test it out without kind of giving that to the shell, we can go ahead and just create a demo account. And we can go ahead and do this. And this will like start the process of just creating a demo project for us. So that requires absolutely no spend on your end,
which is always nice.
Yeah. And here we can, as we're waiting for this, we can go ahead and take some questions.
I do have a question. I want to make sure this is available like in every region, etc. There's no need to sign up. You can just go ahead and you connect this to your GitHub account and get it going right away.
Yeah. So basically, because we're using your underlying infrastructure, because we're using your underlying AWS or GCP infrastructure or Azure infrastructure, it's limited to whatever region or area you can deploy into, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not necessarily limited by region, you're limited by, I guess, whatever your cloud provider is offering you, right? So, and here is where we set some kind of like our basic like workspace names. If you were to do this during the CLI, this would be given to you through a install wizard that you would enter these values in the CLI and it would kind of guide you through that. But here in the Cloud Shell, you can use kind of this more logical workflow that we walk you through. And this is like the subdomain that all of our Plural applications are going to be deployed in. Something that Plural does for you is that it will automatically manage TLS and will manage hosting of all of your applications. So eventually, since we had our name was Octavia Test 3. So all of our applications will be deployed under the subdomain of octaviatest3.onplural.sh. So for example, if we were to deploy Airbyte onto this Plural instance, we would have airbyte.octaviatest3.onplural.sh. And you would just, once Airbyte is deployed there, all you have to do is just type that into your web browser and that would be your Airbyte instance. Some of you may ask, like, how do you manage like authentication and authorization? Plural has a built-in OpenID Connect system that is optionally deployed through every application. So you can manage all of your just through being logged into your plural.sh account. So the moment that you head to that screen, the moment you head to the Airbyte screen, which will be like airbyte.octaviatest3.onplural.sh, it will basically do a check and say, hey, you're trying to access Plural, log in here with your Plural account. And so this gives you authentication for all of your apps and gives you like security for all of your apps that you deploy across your Plural cluster. And now we're going to go ahead and just spin up the Cloud Shell, making sure everything's ready. Again, this is completely free for anyone to try. And
free is always nice. Yeah, always nice.
Cool. So here we are. So this is a virtualized environment where we have all of the dependencies loaded for you to try out Plural. And we have just given it our GitHub credentials, and we are using a free demo cluster, so we don't have to worry about giving it our cloud credentials. If we went through the cloud credentials setup, we would just have to add the if it's GCP, we just add the service account key, or if it's AWS, we just add the access keys, and that would be the only difference in this part of the setup. Here we can just plural bundle list Airbyte to see like what Airbyte installation is available for us, and all we need to do is run plural bundle install Airbyte GCP. So this is pretty much once we're here, it'll start walking us through. This is the CLI experience, like all the things that we need in order to make sure that our Airbyte deployment is properly deployed into our GCP cluster. Here, it's going to give us a few things that are connected. The previous thing was a VPC name, so we always deploy into a VPC in your cloud account. And here's just basically a bucket name for storing the write-ahead logs for Postgres. And here's the Airbyte bucket, which will store your Airbyte logs. Plural also optionally deploy with a console. Will automatically manage all of the logs that you get from Airbyte. Here's where we're going to specify where the host name for where our Plural installation will be available from. I believe I did not. That's going to be Airbyte via test. Plural. Cool. And then here's where we can access the Airbyte API. So we'll just call that Airbyte dev 3 plural.sh. Cool. And here's where we enable Plural OIDC, as I mentioned before. This will allow you to use Plural as your identity provider. And so when anyone tries to log into any of the apps hosted on the web, it will force you to log in through Plural to make sure that to restrict access from anyone that just tries to log into your hosted applications. Additionally, we can install the Plural console, which gives you a bunch of really powerful things. The Plural console allows you to basically check logs. It allows you to check node health. It allows you to check the basically specific pod logs and deployment logs for your Kubernetes cluster. And we have built incident handling for that too. So
amazing.
So all we have to do is just list the console, do Plural bundle install console, and this is just how we install this onto your cluster. And there we go. And now we're done. All we do is run Plural build. This will actually build out all of the YAML, the Helm, and the Terraform for us using the configuration that we just gave it. So now that we're done building, we can go ahead and see some of that. So here is all of these files that have been created for us by our Plural build commands. So we can just go and check out Airbyte. We can just see we can go and see maybe the Terraform files that have been created for us. So if we look at, this is just kind of like the main Terraform file. We can go and we can see the main Helm files that have been created for us. One of the really awesome things about this is that you can eject all of this configuration from Plural. You are not locked into using Plural using any of this configuration. So all we've done for you is we've set up all of the scaffolding and we've set up all of the infrastructure required to make sure that everything runs properly together. So if you wanted to just take all of this generated Helm and Terraform and just wanted to, I guess, take it and install it onto, I guess, your own Kubernetes cluster, or if you wanted to kind of run your own bespoke configuration, you can take all of this configuration that has been created for you. So now all you would need to do is run plural deploy commit, and this will actually start off the deployment of both the Airbyte and the console and the actual Kubernetes cluster. So if we do that, this will basically start all of the Terraform applications. Now this is going to take a bit, as you know, like all of the if you've worked with any cloud provider before, spinning up a Kubernetes cluster or any infrastructure does take a while. So there is one that I've already created.
Oh, smart. Nice.
Yeah. So what we can do is actually we can go ahead and use the Airbyte installation that we use for our. So we actually we dog food Plural, and we dog food Airbyte, and we dog food a lot of these like open source tools. So we actually use an Airbyte connector to sync a lot of our data into a Postgres database. So we'll go to the Airbyte Plural installation that we have.
There you go.
And here is actually where we run a lot of our syncs. This is where we sync our intercom data. This is where we sync our GitHub data. Here is where we basically deployed like all of our, and I wanted to show an active instance so that to show like something that is actually deployed on Plural. So here's where we take all of our GitHub community data and we sync it to Postgres, and then we run a superset on top of it. So we could also access our superset that is co-located with this Airbyte instance. So this is kind of like a really good example of an entire data stack deployed onto Plural. Something that I can also do is I can also show I can show the console that we deploy alongside every Plural installation. So here's the Plural console. As I showed, you can deploy the Plural console just by running a Plural bundle install command during the setup process. And here is a Airbyte instance that I've deployed and a console instance that I've deployed alongside of it. You can run a Postgres scaling runbook, which allows you to scale Airbyte's Postgres instance that backs Airbyte. We can go ahead and check out each of these different services or deployments that are deployed from Kubernetes, and we can check out logs. So for example, if we wanted to look at the Airbyte server pod, and the Airbyte server pod, we didn't know what was going on with it, we basically get all of that information through this console. So we can go ahead and dive specifically into this pod, check out the events. We found out that at some point this was like the readiness probe was failing, so we could go ahead and check out exactly why that is. Now it's finally normal. We can go ahead and see, okay, maybe the TLS isn't coming up, and we can kind of look into why, and we can use this information to properly diagnose it, and we can give you better support on Discord with this too. We can check out our node health. So this is the nodes that are underlying the Kubernetes cluster that I've deployed. This is an Amazon cluster that I've deployed before, and this gives us all of the information to make sure that we are running enough resources to back all of the applications that we have installed. We can go ahead and directly edit our Helm or Terraform for Airbyte here. We have direct incident response, and if something happens, if there's an error, we actually automatically populate an incident here, and you can directly address your incidents through there. Additionally, we have all of these custom dashboards. These are actually custom Grafana dashboards that are created specifically for Airbyte, and you can go ahead and monitor your cluster through this. So there's a lot of huge benefits to deploying the console, and this is actually a huge part of, I think, Plural's value proposition, is that not only do we offer this experience of deploying Kubernetes and deploying applications onto Kubernetes, we also kind of package in the other parts of the experience that aren't obvious, right? There's like the runbooks, like monitoring. And so deploying monitoring alongside an application usually involves kind of exporting Prometheus variables, setting up Prometheus, and then setting up Grafana, connecting Grafana to look at the proper Prometheus variables. So we've kind of set up a lot of that stuff for you. And again, like completely open source, completely available for you to jump in and start trying out.
And this is only on the Airbyte application, or if not, when do you plan on moving it to other applications as well?
So actually, if you install any application, it will pull up specifically the Grafana dashboards for that application.
Okay.
So like every application will ship with their own custom tailored Grafana dashboards that we've either found from the provider or that we've created ourselves to properly cover all the monitoring cases for a specific application.
A question someone just asked, is it possible to add alerting on these monitors within Plural?
That is I don't think that's something that you specifically can do, but you might be able to set up a webhook. I think that's a question that I think if there's I think Michael Michael answered that in the chat. that wasn't something that I specifically had.
For those who can't see the chat, this will be on a YouTube video. Michael responded with, you actually pre-configure alerts for many the monitors, but you can use Prometheus operator to add others via relatively simple CRD. Thank you. Just YouTube won't be able to see that answer. So cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So Michael is actually the creator of Plural. He is the one who
nice. Hi, Michael. Name's Chris.
He's the one who designed out all of this stuff. So amazing. If you come into our Discord, so we're going to be, I guess if we could leave a link to our Discord in the chat, he's the one who basically answers a lot of the questions. We have a really quick response time to answering a lot of the questions about our deployments. We're pretty new. We're open source. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's involved with kind of running Kubernetes. There's a lot of complications that come up, but we respond pretty immediately to all the questions that people have about Plural and about people's individual deployments. And as we mentioned, we do have this built-in incident response. So if you want to just talk to us here directly through Intercom, you don't need to necessarily talk to us on Discord. But I'd love for you to come and hang out with us in the Discord. I do want to build out the community, and I hope that. And I've seen a lot of the awesome community interactions from Airbyte, and I'd love to get some of that into our Plural Discord.
Oh, excellent. I did have a question, and someone asked this question as well. Fraser asked this question. So as of right now, you're supporting mainly open source applications and Marketplace, but will it always only be open source, or will you eventually do closed source applications?
I guess in complete transparency, there might be a future case in which we offer someone else's hosted service as a option that you can deploy onto Plural, because it makes sense for us to, I guess, partner with these, not only like the open source projects, but also people running maybe sometimes managed services of these projects. So something that makes sense is to basically, we will obviously always offer like the open source versions of these applications in the marketplace, but it's totally possible for us. And this is actually, some of this is actually in the work. If there are companies that want to partner with us to basically deploy their application on Plural, and it's a closed source application, it's totally possible. It's not something that's impossible. It's just something that would have to be figured out on a case-to-case basis.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the goal, I mean, everything's free right now. So open source is the way to go if we want everything to be free. Definitely. Thank you for taking time to answer that. Yeah, this has been great. Is there anything you want to end this call with? Any last words other than like you miss working with me? I know that's for sure. No, just kidding. But no, any last words before we end this call? And where can people, do you have Slack or is it in Discord?
So as I mentioned before, I think we can pull up the links to those. So we mainly communicate through our Discord. So if you want to join our Discord, I'm going to drop an invite link in here. Here's the invite to our Discord. If you can go ahead and join that, and that's where you can start discussing about Plural. As like Fraser mentioned, like you can discuss about adding different applications to the Plural Marketplace. We can talk about collaborations that we can do. You can get support for your Plural deployment either through the Discord help channel or through Intercom, as we mentioned, through the Plural console. Additionally, we do have a pretty decent memes channel, so if you want to
I'll join for that part.
No, it's fun talking to you again, Chris. It was great working with you. So
you left me.
I'm glad that we still get to collaborate and chat here. So
no, definitely. This has been fun. Awesome. Again, please join their Discord and bother Abhi as much as possible. DM him about any questions, anything general. But awesome, excellent. Abhi, thank you so much for just sharing with the Airbyte community what Plural is and how it can really make a difference in the life of engineers. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining the call, and we'll see everyone next time.